So you had come to me with some concerns about one of your blocks. And so can you tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing with them?
It's my period 3, which I have during lunch or after lunch or before lunch. So their engagement and their focus is already getting pulled off. And they're also my lower of my 2 magnets, so they're a little less driven to read longer text anyway. And it's just, since we're getting to the 4th marking period, I've noticed that the engagement is going down a little. Multiple people want to put their heads down, or they just aren't trying. They don't care. They're just going to take what they get, and they're okay with it.
Okay. So what I'm kind of hearing is that this is one of the 2 of your merit classes, and you're starting to see them kind of lose engagement. So when I hear you say you're starting to see them do that, it makes me think that maybe you've seen a different behavior before that. What had you seen before that was different?
I would say when they first came in, they were kind of the same, where they were like, I don't want to read, I don't want to do all this work. I don't think they weren't ready for that level. But then as they got more used to it and the expectations, they started to get more involved and less about the complaining than they were. And so the middle of the year was pretty steady, and they would do their work, and some would push back, but they were coming up and asking questions, getting help. And we were reading Ender's Game, and a lot of them were scared about the size at first, but then after they got over that, they found out they really liked the book. So it could possibly have to do with what we were reading, but during the time we were doing the novel, we were able to work through those engagement activities.
So were they putting forth that effort in the novel that you said that?
Yeah, the majority of them were putting forth the effort, turning work on them. Time was a little different, but they were still putting effort whenever we worked on the.
Okay, so did you see the
activities.
change after Ender's Game? Is that when you're kind of saying you saw?
I would say, yeah. Once we finished the essay that we did, we watched it and compared, and then since we've moved on, it's kind of started to go down.
Okay. When did that fall? Was that
End of marking period 3.
okay?
Yeah.
So, marking period 4. I know we've looked through that module, and it seems like a lot of the standards are end of the year they need to do this. They're kind of broader. What are you doing? I know you're hitting some of those students with some standards that they were having trouble with before. What are you doing maybe to bring them back to that? Since you said before they were more on, are there some ways that you're using some of the strategies that you used before?
I think they were really into Ender's Game and just the story in itself and all the action, the cussing, and just, I think they could relate to it because he was a younger child. So we've been trying to find texts that pull them in, like when we use Lamb to the Slaughter and things like that, something that's just going to hold their attention.
Okay.
So.
And when you're saying like hold their attention, do you see it with all of the students or just some?
I would say just some. There's a handful. I would say probably 3/4 are engaged, but there's always that 1/4 that their heads are down. They don't want to try, and they don't participate during discussion. Even when you try to pull them in, they just kind of sit and stare at you.
Okay. So when you had asked me about it before, it came in just for a little bit, probably half an hour to kind of take some notes. So I just jotted down some observations of what I had seen, what the kids were doing. So if you want to take a look at that, and maybe if there's anything that you notice that maybe pops out to you, we'll discuss.
The group in the back and C trying to pull theirs off. She's in the front now, but still trying to do that. The group in the back is always, and it's just trying to find room. I wish I didn't have to sit anybody at that table. It's the only class that I don't have enough room, and I have to have people back there.
Okay. So is that the group that kind of you were speaking about, or is it some of them that are?
It's some of them. One of them today, definitely, but then the one that I'm thinking of right now sits right up front.
Okay.
It's part of his attitude towards the class, but he was doing really well and making improvements, and then he just started to kind of go back to what he was doing before.
Okay. Well, I saw the other day, you had that group in the media center reading. I noticed that was probably a strategy. What other strategies have you used to kind of rein in those students that you're targeting with these behaviors?
I think moving them closer to me, strategically placing them in groups. When we did the westward expansion, after that we did a point of view of the Native Americans, so the other side, and I made sure that those that are getting distracted and getting pulled off were placed with stronger students, and the students who were also just natural leaders who wouldn't let them get quite pulled off as much.
Did that help them?
It did. It helped some. One of the students was like, "I see what you did there. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it." And I'm like, thanks.
So one of the students that needed the accountability.
Well, it was one of the students that was giving the accountability. She's like, I get that. She knew right away.
So she was willing to help.
Yeah, and she was willing to help. And they were all into it, and they all completed as much as we could within the time that we did.
So do you think that's a strategy that maybe you want to continue with moving forward with some of those? Is that something that's been effective with what you've tried so far?
I think so, because then when we went back to working with who they wanted to, they always, the ones who get distracted easily, and that are the issues with engagement right now, always tend to go to each other. So they also don't have those people to sit and distract. Like C gets put with people who aren't quite as chatty and are more focused, so if she tries, eventually she'll see that they just don't care, and they're not going to get into that. So I think that's worked. And Lamb to the Slaughter, they did get to pick their own partners, but they still were very engaged in it, I think, just because of the story.
Okay. So what I hear kind of what's working is the engaging stories that they're in, and also getting, when you're placing them in groups somewhat, so either really engaging pieces that they're having with the groups that they're selecting, or you're strategically selecting who they're working with. What do you think moving forward might help with these kids to keep, I know we got
40 some days.
40 some days.
I'm not keeping count. I have students keeping count, but I'm not keeping count.
Because I know it's going to get harder for them as it goes on, but it sounds like you have some great strategies in place. What ones do you think moving forward might keep that going?
Along with strategically placing them, we've been using vocabulary a lot, and when you put vocabulary on, they just sit there and it's silent, and they're involved in it, and if they do start talking, it's because they're singing along with the song. So it's relevant to them, like, just because it's rap, so I think that's more meaningful to them. At the same time, like today we used it for connotation, denotation, got the definitions from that out of it, and they were able to get it right away and understand it, so like they're so enthralled with it and so into it without really realizing that I'm making them learn, and they're viewing stuff with a purpose, so we're getting those standards in without them realizing.
Yeah.
And then we've been taking our comprehension questions and turning them into games, or our one historical context research we turned into a scavenger hunt. So just putting that kind of little extra purpose to it has seemed to help keep them.
All right, so it sounds like kind of the goals then, using some of that vocabulary to keep them engaged and into it. I guess that kind of gives C and some of those other who try to get that attention and be loud, they get to be that in that academic way that you're arranging for them. And then kind of selecting the groups when it's not as exciting and engaging to keep them on task. Is there anything you need from me the next time I come in? Do you want me to look for anything or help support any of these goals in any ways?
I think with like the reading and the videos, they're staying engaged. Then when we come to discussions, not all of them are engaged, and that's when I start to lose them again. So maybe some strategies on how to keep everybody involved in discussion without having to go, I'm giving you participation points, so that's why you're going to want to participate today.
Okay.
So some kind of motivation for them to want, or some strategy to get them more involved, because I have the same 8 to 10 raising their hand every time, and everybody else is just letting them carry the discussion. So
okay. Do they currently have a guide or a rubric or something that they follow during that? Or,
Yeah, we've talked about like discussion starters, but they don't have a guide or a rubric.
okay, would that be something that maybe we could meet with and we can come up with, or we can get an outline of so that the students could kind of even design it
Right.
and have
Yeah,
a piece in it?
Yeah, that was I was thinking when you said that, seeing what they think maybe what the discussion should look like and the expectations that they should have for each other.
Sure. Then why don't we set that for next week then, and then we can meet and kind of set that for our next goal so that we can see their engagement in the discussions
Okay.
too, so it kind of takes it that next step. All right, that sounds good. Do you think you have some good
I
things
think
to go
so,
forward?
yeah, because this one's the biggest thing right now is
The
we've
discussion.
been working with those and now the discussion's that final piece of trying to get them, and I think discussions tend to be with every class. Like,
Yeah.
there are some days where every class just needs some extra little push.
Great. Then we'll meet and plan for that.
Okay,
Thanks.
sounds good, thank you.